Good afternoon. Today I wanted to introduce, as we study Parshas Vayetzei, I wanted to go look at a commentary which I found in Rabbi Mintz's library, Rabbi Ben Mintz's library, and that's the commentary of the Chasam Sofer. He has an anthology of the Chasam Sofer on the Torah. This anthology was produced by Rabbi Yosef Stern, and Rabbi Yosef Stern gathered the comments of the Chasam Sofer on the portion. He gathered them from different places, and he was able to collect them as they relate to the Torah portion. Now, just a word about the Chasam Sofer. Chasam Sofer started the most influential yeshiva he was in Pressburg, and he died in 1839. So he was born in 1762, died in 1839, and his yeshiva produced hundreds of leaders, and he was known for being one of the, as you can imagine, living in Pressburg in the 18th and 19th century. He was facing, as a devoutly Orthodox rabbi, facing the threat posed by the Enlightenment, posed by people who are anti-Orthodox. So he was a powerful voice against those who wanted to change the traditional approach. And his commentaries are absolutely brilliant commentaries. So Rabbi Mintz has this book, which I actually found while I was looking for a different book, which I didn't find. And I wanted to go through some of the commentaries of this, some of the thoughts of the Chasam Sofer on our portion. The Chasam Sofer, at least in this anthology, he often takes off from a comment of Rashi. And after he looks at Rashi's comment, he shares his perspective. So first of all, we'll cite the commentary of Rashi as well, and we'll talk about what he's referring to. I want to mention that if you want to join us for the Rashi commentary, every day we study Rashi on the Torah portion, and that's 25 to 30 minutes before Mincha. That's this week at 4:15. But that's also on our YouTube channel, so you can like and subscribe and get updates on the YouTube channel. So the first comment that we'll look at the Chasam Sofer is on the verse. He's so creative. The Chasam Sofer's brilliance is so creative and powerful. So I'll share with you. It says in the verse, Vayetzei Yaakov mi Be'er Sheva vayelech Harana. That Yaakov departed from Be'er Sheva and he went to Haran. Yaakov departed from Be'er Sheva and he went to Haran. So the commentaries, and including Rashi, are saying, like, what is this verse even telling us? This verse, we told this at the end of the last parsha, at the end of Parshas Toldos. We already know this idea because it says, Vayelach Padana Aram. At the end of last week's portion, it says that Yaakov left. He left towards Padan Aram, which is basically in the same Velt as Haran. So we already know that Yaakov had departed. So why does it come back and repeat it? So Rashi is going to tell us this. I'll review the Rashi. I'll repeat what Rashi says. That the first verse is superfluous. Another reason why the first verse is seemingly redundant is, why does it need to tell us that Jacob left Beersheba? If he went to Haran, he clearly left Beersheba. You can't get to Haran without leaving Beersheba. Beersheba was from last week's portion that Yitzchak built the wells in the place, and he made a treaty with Avimelech in the place called Beersheba. So since that was the case, why does it need to say he went from Beersheba and he left Beersheba and he went to Haran? So the Rashi is very powerful here. So Rashi says, I will just review the Rashi and then we'll read what the Chasam Sofer says. I'll break up the Rashi into a few parts. The Rashi says, Vayetzei Yaakov. Why did he leave? Or why does it tell us he left? That the daughters of Canaan were acting sinfully in the eyes of Yitzchak, his father. And then Halach Esav el Yishmael. And so therefore Esav went to Yishmael to take a wife. Esav had married the daughters of Canaan, but because they had done evil, it says in the end of the last week's portion, and Esav saw that the daughters of Canaan had done evil in the eyes of Yitzchak, his father, and Esav went to Yishmael. He went to Yitzchak's brother Yishmael, and he took a daughter from Yishmael. He took a wife from Yishmael's daughter. He married the daughter of Yishmael, and took him to be his wife. So since it says that at the end, so therefore for this reason, Jacob departed. Why? Because the daughters of the Canaan were evil, and in the eyes of his father. Therefore, Esav went to Yishmael to take a wife. So Hifsika Inyam Parsha Toshal Yaakov, and so the Torah interrupts the passage of Jacob and tells us Vayar Esav ki veirach, and Esav saw that Yitzchak had blessed. And when he concludes that, Umisha Gamar, and when it concludes that story, Chazar le'inyan harishon, it goes back to the first part, meaning to say that the Torah tells us that Yaakov had left, but it then tells us, it interrupts it, it digresses to tell us that Esav saw that his father didn't like the daughters of Canaan, so he married a wife from the daughters of Yishmael. And then it goes back to the story that Jacob finds a wife that Jacob needs to depart from Beersheba and go to Haran. That's the first answer that Rashi tells us. The Chasam Sofer has a very creative commentary on this Rashi. So the Chasam Sofer says, first of all, Rashi's statement, this is what the Chasam Sofer does. He's so brilliantly, he says Rashi's statement is telling us that there's a deep connection between Esav's marriage and the events of our parsha. How many times have I read this parsha without noticing what the Chasam Sofer has said? He's saying that the Torah is pointing out that there's a deep connection between not only Yaakov's actions, but Esav's action at the very end of this portion. That Esav took a wife from Yishmael because the daughters of Canaan were wicked in the eyes of his father. And this is what the Chasam Sofer writes. He says, first, Hashem has not yet appeared to Yaakov. Hashem has never appeared to Yaakov. Before Yaakov has this dream, Yaakov had been studying in yeshiva for 14 years. That's what Rashi tells us. But Hashem has never appeared to Yaakov until he has the dream at the outset of our portion. And so what's the Chasam Sofer's point? He says, even though Yaakov was worthy of receiving the divine revelation, as long as Esav merited to have the honor, because Esav in rabbinic literature, as sinful as he is, he had one incredible merit. And what was the incredible merit of Esav? That he was excellent at honoring his father. That this was an area where Esav excelled. Even though Esav was spiritually not on the level of Jacob, but he was excellent at honoring his father. But now, even though the women of Canaan were bad in the eyes of his father, he didn't leave those marriages. Instead, he just took another wife. And so therefore he remained married to these Canaanite wives who he wasn't supposed to be married to. And so Esav, as a result of this, forfeited the only merit that he had. He forfeited this enormous merit. And so therefore, that's the context, says the Chasam Sofer, in which Yaakov now is going to be able to receive the divine revelation. Because Hashem didn't want to reward Yaakov with this promise as long as Esav was still, so to speak, in the picture, because Esav was so great in this one area. But Esav faltered. And now That's the first part, he says. I know people have some questions, so just give me a minute. I'll come back and I'll take the question. I just want to finish this one Chasam Sofer, then we'll take some questions on what he says. It's a little bit of a piece, so just give me a minute. And then he says the enormity of Esav's offense, that Esav refused to leave these Canaanite women, is emphasized by a point that Rashi makes, that there is a teaching that all of a groom's sins are forgiven on their wedding day. A wedding day is like Yom Kippur. And that's why the groom and bride fast, the groom wears a kittel, but all the concept is that a wedding day is like a fresh start. You're starting over. So everything was forgiven. But Esav, by refusing, he married this woman from the daughters of Yishmael, but he never divorced the Canaanite women. And as a result of this, he was mocking, says the Chasam Sofer, the sanctity of the marriage. And so, therefore, this is the Chasam Sofer's words, Esav's cynicism caused the exact effect. Not only were his sins not forgiven, but it reminded Hashem, says the Chasam Sofer, of all of his sins, and brought his many actions and highlighted his many sinful actions. So I'm still on the first verse. Once we finish the first verse, then we'll open it up to some questions. But that's the first point he makes, that Yaakov's ascent as the spiritual leader of the tribe, of the descendants of Abraham and Isaac, comes because of this mistake of Esav, that Esav saw the pain that his Canaanite wives were causing Esav, and he didn't do anything about it. But then Rashi says the following point. We'll look back at the Rashi. Rashi says, it only needed to say that Yaakov went to Haran. Lama hiskir yitziato. Why does it mention that Isaac departed? Why does it need to mention something? So it's one of my favorite Rashis. Rashi tells us, it's to tell us, Magid sheyetzias tzadik min hamakom osa roshem. When a tzaddik leaves a place, it makes a mark, it makes an impression. When a tzaddik is in a city, shebizman tzaddik ba'ir, hu hoda, he is its magnificence. Hu zina, he's its splendor. Hu ziva, he's its splendor. Hu adara, he's its beauty. Yatsa misham, once a tzaddik leaves, pana hoda, pana ziva, pana adara, the beauty, the grandeur, the magnificence has departed. So now, what does the Chasam Sofer say about this? So the Chasam Sofer says that the key word here is Yatsa Misham. Once the tzaddik has left, the grandeur has left the city. And here too, I read this Rashi many, many times, thankfully, but I missed something so obvious that the Chasam Sofer tells us. The Chasam Sofer says that the key word here is when the tzaddik departs. He says as follows. It's a very powerful phrase. If the tzaddik was truly appreciated by the townspeople, then he can never be said to have departed. If the tzaddik was truly appreciated, then he never left. His influence remains in the town even after he leaves. He's not considered to have departed. So, for example, when a tzaddik leaves the world, the Gemara tells us that it says, Yaakov Avinu lo meis. The Gemara tells us that in one place, the Gemara tells us Jacob never died because his descendants are still learning the Torah. So, when a tzaddik departs from the world, then if he's eulogized properly, if people mourn for him, then his lessons of his life are continued, then he's not considered to have departed. But Yaakov Avinu was different in this case, says the Chasam Sofer, because he was running away for his life. So therefore, his going away actually was a departure. So he says, if a tzaddik is not properly commemorated, if his work is not continued, then it's going to leave an impact, because the people Hashem will look at it as though it is, in fact, a departure of the tzaddik. So that's the second point that the Chasam Sofer makes about this first Rashi. Then he makes another point that we actually noticed last night while we were studying, And he says as follows on this verse. It says, I'll just make this last point, then we'll pause. But this is something, it says that Yaakov, when he was leaving, it says that he came to a place. What place did he come to? So Rashi tells us he came to the place which was mentioned elsewhere, because it says Vayifgaba Makom, the place. It means we have a reference to an earlier place. What was the place which was referenced earlier? So Rashi tells us that Yaakov came to Mount Moriah. How could he come to Mount Moriah? He's in Beit El. So the Rashi tells us a few possibilities. One possibility is that the ladder went across Mount Moriah. But another possibility, Rashi says, is that he went all the way to Haran and then he came back. He traveled all the way to Haran, and then he realized that he had not stopped and prayed at Mount Moriah, and so then he returned and he went back all the way to Mount Moriah after he had left. So that's what Rashi tells us, that he said, how could I have not prayed in this place? So the question is, says the Chasam Sofer, that Yaakov, that Rashi said that Yaakov arrived at Haran, and then he realized that he hadn't prayed, and so he returned to Mount Moriah. Let me see if I can find this exact Rashi. Hold on, here it is. Let me see. Okay, here he says, it's the Rashi says, okay, this is the Rashi to Pasuk Yud Zayin, but it's coming back, verse 17, but it's going back on the beginning. Rashi says that Yaakov Avinu said to himself, Kishavar Yaakov al Beit HaMikdash, when Jacob passed by the holy temple, Madua lo ikfu sham, why did God not stop him there? So the answer is, first Chasam Sofer says, the answer is, why didn't Yaakov stop there? But secondly, Yaakov went all the way to Haran. And then after he made it to Haran, he said, is it possible that it passed by the spot where all my ancestors prayed and I didn't pray there? Yav date lemeheder. He went back. V'chazer ad Beit El. He went all the way back, and the earth contracted for him. He made it all the way back to Beit El, and the earth contracted for him. So now, the Chasam Sofer says the following: why didn't Yaakov stop to pray at Mount Moriah? He was passing by the temple. Why did Yaakov not stop to pray at Mount Moriah? This was something, as I was reading this Rashi yesterday, I had the same question. I said, how could it be that Yaakov Avinu didn't stop to daven? Well, Jews go from all over the world to go to the Kotel. Why did Yaakov just pass by like it's any other spot? So, also, says the Chasam Sofer, how come Rashi says that when Yaakov realized he didn't stop at Mount Moriah, he had gone all the way to Haran, he went all the way to Mesopotamia, and then rather than go all the way back to Yerushalayim, the mountain met him in the middle. The mountain met him at Beit El. Why does that have to be placed? Why don't we just say, Yaakov, go all the way to Mount Moriah, go all the way back? In fact, we know that when the servant of Abraham went, it says in chapter 24, verse 42, it says, and then when the servant of Abraham traveled to find a wife for Isaac, it says there, Hayom yatzati bayom bati, mikan shekafselo haaretz. The servant of Abraham traveled with lightning speed. He had kfitzas haderech. He was able to go in one day from Canaan all the way to Haran. So how come Yaakov Avinu, with respect to Jacob, the mountain had to get up and travel? So these are the questions the Chasam Sofer asks. So his answer to me, I had to read the sentence a few times, but he says, in response to this question, we can say that a traveler is privileged to benefit from miraculous acceleration, what we call kfitzas haderech, only if he truly desires to reach his destination. Only if we're truly desiring to reach our destination will Hashem help us get there quickly. So that's the first thing. If Yaakov Avinu had truly been desiring to get there, then he would have had this accelerated travel. But Yaakov Avinu, he had been reluctant to pray at Mount Moriah. So therefore, because he had been reluctant to pray there, he didn't have this kfitzas haderech, that he didn't have this lightning travel. So he says, however, on a deeper level, this is the difference between Yaakov and the servant of Abraham. The servant of Abraham was a Canaanite. And so therefore, when he left Canaan, the outside the land of Israel, that land jumped up to meet him because that's where his destiny was going. But Yaakov, the area outside the land of Israel, didn't jump up to meet him because that wasn't his destiny. His destiny was supposed to be in the land. And now the Chasam Sofer says, why did Yaakov not desire to pray at Mount Moriah? Why didn't he desire to pray there? So this is his answer. Maybe you couldn't come up with a different answer, but this was his answer. He was afraid to remain there alone or to travel there at night. He was afraid. Although someone engaged in a mitzvah, I just find this to be a very human answer, that Yaakov Avinu was afraid to go there by himself. Sometimes people are afraid to go. So he says, we don't really think about Yaakov having fear, but Yaakov was afraid to go there by himself, or at night. Someone engaged in a mitzvah is usually protected from harm. But this only applies, you're going to be protected from harm only if it's a normal trip. But if it's a dangerous trip, you can't assume that God is going to protect you. And so therefore, once Yaakov reached Haran, only then did he have the recognition that Haran, that the Temple Mount was actually the most secure place. But at the time, he didn't appreciate it. He thought it was too dangerous. Or else it was only, he gives a second answer. Once Yaakov Avinu reached Haran, he realized what he was missing the whole time. He realized what he had in front of him. Sometimes you don't realize what you're missing until you reach a different place. And when he reached Haran, which was a place filled with the ritual, with the spiritual impurities of outside the land of Israel, he realized, what did I miss? I had this incredible beauty of the Temple Mount in my presence, and I just ignored it. And so therefore, at that point, he was willing to endanger his life and go back. And so therefore, that's why he traveled back. He gives one more answer. One more answer is that the last answer he gives about this question is, it wasn't Mount Moriah, but Yaakov Avinu didn't think that he was worthy to get the divine. Hashem had never appeared to him. He didn't realize that he was worthy to get the revelation from God yet. And so therefore, he felt, what's the reason why I need to stop there? He felt, I needed to first get married. That's what his parents had told him to do. So he said, I'm going to travel there. But once he left the land of Israel and he had this dream as he was on the outskirts, he realized that God was appearing to him. And that's when he realized he needed to go back to Mount Moriah. Those are the Chasam Sofer's explanations. Now, I know some people had some questions, so I'll just pause for a moment and take some questions.